So, on this episode of Sticky Note Conversations, I have the honor of having a conversation with a colleague and friend, Erika Clemmons Dean, who is the Deputy Director of Family Values at Work, who I will also note that I am the board chair of Family Values at Work. I always try to give those disclaimers, not that it necessarily makes any difference, but just in case it does, let's err on the side of legalities that I am the board chair and have been for a number of years. I actually don't even remember how many years at this point. I think I might be on year 4. I think my reign is coming to an end. But Family Values at Work is a organization, a network hub of organizations that fight for care issues. So paid family leave, paid sick days, childcare, all the things that for my work falls under a reproductive justice and we look at through a reproductive justice framework, because you can't have reproductive justice if you do not have quality care for yourself and your family. And so I'm really excited to be able to talk to you, Erika, about your advocacy work and how it actually hits home for you, because it's not just a professional goal, but also a personal goal for you to be wanting to advocate for these policies, both at a federal and a state level. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So how did you get involved in nonprofit work, like as a whole? Like, what made you decide to do this, or was this always the plan?
This absolutely was never the plan. I was in high school about to be this, commercial illustrator, work for Disney as an animator. Like, that was my dream job and my actual goal. And I did the college program for Disney, 2 years there, came home, and like most young girls, thought I was going to fall in love and just be this happy. But I actually ended up getting pregnant and with my first child. And I was living in Ohio at the time, and I started having, I went into labor at 20 weeks, very early. And in Ohio at that time, they would not attempt to save the babies if the pregnancy wasn't at 22 weeks or further along. So literally got to 2 days before they were like, it's either going to be you or the baby. You have to make a decision today. So, like most Black women, when we're faced with that, I chose to go ahead and deliver my son. He lived for about a couple of hours. I had a vaginal delivery. They didn't attempt to save him, no ventilators, no anything. So I just held him until he passed. And it was at that point, I wasn't activated in maternal health justice or any type of social justice work. I was going to be an artist. So none of this stuff dawned on me, or I thought about it.
How old were you?
I was 25. Yep, I was 25. So I had Jason, immediately went back to work the following week, because it was something that I didn't mentally want to deal with. And it was just hard, to receive. That was my first child. So, life goes on, came to Georgia, started working in Atlanta, and I got pregnant again with my daughter, Renaya. The pregnancy went, really well up until the 7th month. And I went for my last kind of ultrasound before we were, in the planning stages of delivery, and went for the ultrasound. And during the ultrasound, she had 6 seizures. So we watched her have the seizures, and then they immediately took me to emergency C-section. And from the time they put me to sleep to the time I came out of recovery, she had 3 heart attacks. So she was born. She was doing pretty well, kind of the first 2 days. And then by the 3rd day, she was on full life support, dependent on oxygen. 70 to 80% dependent on the life support. And at that point, they were like, you know, you need to make a decision. Do you want to continue with her on the life support? This is very damaging for her. Like this, she's not going to have a, you know, real fruitful like lifespan because of just the amount of oxygen she's lost. So I took her off of life support to see, you know, what will happen. She ended up passing a couple of hours after we took her off of life support. So at that point,
And how old were you then?
Then I was 27. So it was 2 years after Jason. At that point, Morehouse School of Medicine had asked if they can keep the body to just, you know, do some research on it. They had not seen an infant have like seizures in the womb. Like we were able to watch the seizures. And then she had the 3 heart attacks. So they kept her body for 3 months. And at that moment, you know, that was really devastating because it was she was much older than Jason was. So more developed, a full baby. Jason was like he was less than a pound for sure. And they had put me with March of Dimes, which was a bunch of white women support groups. And I did not fit in there. Like, I just did not feel like they understood what I was going through or understood like, you know, just how our community deals with grief and deals with the loss of babies. And it just didn't fit right. So that's when I first started like getting involved with maternal health justice stuff and trying to figure out just, you know, what do I need to be doing? Because not once did the doctor say there's something wrong, you can't carry the babies, not once throughout my pregnancies. So 3 months later, I was able to bury her after they did all the research and stuff on her body. Still didn't find anything, none of that. The 2 years after that, I got pregnant with Paige. And they were like, okay, because of the last 2 babies, we're going to, you know, be very cautious. You should go on bed rest early. You should get these progesterone shots, things like that. And at 5 months into my pregnancy, I went for an ultrasound and they were like, you have no amniotic fluid. The baby has no amniotic fluid whatsoever. So immediate surgery on Paige. She was premature. I had an epidural, and during the C-section, I had an allergic reaction to the epidural. So, you know, they delivered Paige, she cried, but when during the whole process of it, like the allergic reaction caused my body to just like shake ridiculously. So when she was born, her lungs collapsed. So she ended up being in NICU for 3 months. When her lungs collapsed, literally like probably 20 minutes after she was born, and the doctor came in there, I was just like, you know, this baby's about to die too. I was like, you know, that it's very traumatic to try to think that, okay, they are going to be able to save her because of the other pregnancies. So for like maybe the first 3 days, I didn't even go into the NICU because I'm like, I'm not going to get attached to this baby because, you know, she's going to end up dying and stuff anyway. But she actually did really well. She was in the little incubator thing. She was tube fed for the first 2 months. She was getting stronger and stronger. I was actually back at work. I was just a bartender at that time. So I was back at work, going to the hospital at night and then going to work during the day, back to the hospital with her. Because it was like, okay, maybe, you know, she's going to definitely pull out of this. And she did. So she's my little miracle baby now. But even after that, I really started to think about like, how do I need to get involved, like in organizing, like what is the conversations we need to start having around just Black women and pregnancies, even with Paige, like they never said anything was wrong. I don't know how I leaked all of my amniotic fluid. Like I have no answers to none of these, to nothing that has happened in these pregnancies. So I just got, you know, super involved in Atlanta with the maternal health movement and just building on that. But I shifted gears to labor organizing. And that's when I started with the unions and was like, this worker kind of like worker relationship with organizing. Because throughout all of these pregnancies, I went right back to work. I didn't, maybe 3 weeks is the most I spent off from work, but it was because I had no type
Paid
of,
time off.
no paid
So
time off.
so in none of these situations there was the possibility for you to have time off, not only to have your baby, but to also grieve the loss of your children.
Yep. No.
How and so how thinking about that, especially now, you know, you know, in all the years since, how do you feel like you coped with what was actually happening during that time and then going back to work? Losing a child is, devastating for anybody at any age. And to, prepare to have a child and then not be able to bring them home. And I'm assuming maybe you had a baby shower and those sort of things and you have stuff. Um, like what, like how were you coping?
Yeah, I think I wasn't coping. My coping mechanism was work. Like it was if I just work and keep my mind off of it, it doesn't affect me. So it was years before I even realized the magnitude of not having paid leave, and not having the time to grieve. And that time, when the babies are born and you're supposed to build that relationship with them, I never got that opportunity to do that with none of the babies, and especially not with Paige in those first hours because in those first months, because she was in this bubble in the NICU hospital. So I think that affected our relationship. If I didn't get that mother child bond like most parents get at those years. So yeah, it threw me straight into work. Like work harder so you don't have to deal with it or think about it. And yeah, that's my work ethic now. It's like just work, 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 work.
Did doctors offer you any sort of therapy or suggestions on to um how to move through some of these things? Did they check in with you regularly?
No, there was no check-in. There was, go to a support group, which was March of Dimes, which is very
Mhm.
white presenting. And it is a great organization, but it's not what I needed. Uh,
Mhm.
Not what most Black women need in that space. Because a lot of those women have support. So, all of my children was by the same father, but we were not married. We were living together. It's a different type of support for when you with a group of women that's in their marriage, they have all of their family and things like that. So, yeah, it was different.
Do you feel like the doctors cared enough to understand what was happening to your body and what was happening to your children to cause you to have such um, high risk pregnancies and high risk births?
No, I don't think they cared at all, honestly. Because I think about how like I went into or started having labor with Jason at his was around 4.5 months. And that's similar to how Paige's was. I lost amniotic fluid that I know of at 5 months. It could have been before that. But it just so happened it was 5 months that I had the ultrasound. And there was no follow-up after these pregnancies of like, let's get some testing done to see if your uterus lining is thick enough, or what is it that's causing you not to be able to hold them to full term. None of that was done. Like it was research done on Renaya, on the baby, but nothing was done on me.
And it's so interesting because I have a similar story with my youngest, and all of my children were small when they were born, um, and they all got progressively smaller. But my youngest um, she weighed 4 pounds
Mhm.
when she was born, And when I went in and because I had small children, they were doing the biophysical profiles on a regular basis. And I was going in for extra tests to see if she was growing. And they had set a inducement date because she wasn't growing anymore. And so they were just trying to keep her in as long as possible, but realizing she wasn't really getting any bigger. And I went in for that last test and they said, you don't have any amniotic fluid. And they asked me if I was leaking. And I said no. And she's like, are you sure? And I'm like, well, I think I would know if I was leaking fluid. Like, I'm not like peeing on myself. And like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling. And I remember, and I think she was a nurse or something, looking at me like I was stupid, looking at me like, how do you not know that, you no longer have amniotic fluid like inside of you? And I'm like, I'm telling you, I do not. I'm like, I would know, like, I'm telling you that I'm not running around dripping anywhere.
Right.
That's not happening. So something else is happening. But it did make me feel very, they made me feel ignorant, and they made me feel like I wasn't paying attention enough to what was going on or what was happening when I considered myself very very educated and high alert, and I read the books and I went to all my doctor's appointments and X, Y, and Z, but it always felt as though they were questioning what I was doing or not doing and not looking deeper as to figuring out what was going on. And even after the fact that she was born, and she was fine. She had perfect APGAR scores and everything, even though she weighed 4 pounds. But then my placenta was really, really tiny. They said it was like the size of a teacup saucer. It was really small. And so they said they sent it away to ran tests, but nothing ever came back. And I don't know that anybody was curious enough to like try to figure out why, my placenta was super small, why she was super small, why, what was happening to have this 4 pound, 16.5 inch long baby. And, I gained more than enough weight. I gained enough weight for a couple kids probably, but, it just never, it never felt to me as though they really wanted to understand what was happening.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely the case. And I think, and it wasn't necessarily because I was so young that I didn't question them or, try to figure out. I immediately went into like, is something wrong with me? Right. Or like, God is trying to tell me that I don't deserve to have kids or whatever. So I didn't even worry about the doctors and what they were thinking, didn't question it or anything. Or want to know, honestly, what was happening. When Paige made it home, I was like, I'm not having kids. I'm not getting pregnant no more. I don't want to go through this trauma. I don't even want to find out if there is something wrong with me. I have my kid and that's it. And sometimes I regret that. I'm like, I should have done more to question, like, why aren't these doctors telling me more about my body? But yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's a matter of, is it hereditary? Is there something happening that, could be nipped in the bud earlier, possibly. But there has to be that want and that curiosity for doctors to want to support the procreation in Black communities.
Yep. That's true.
So tell me, you brought Paige home, and Paige is healthy and all of those things. When in that space did you decide that I need to like really activate and like get out into the community and talk to folks about maternal health issues?
Yeah, so I did a little bit right when she was like in NICU, but I was also working a lot too, to catch up on some bills and things like that. And what I thought was needed my energy or needed to fight actually shifted, because it was like, I had follow-up doctor's appointments, or she had doctor's appointments, and I couldn't like take the time off to do it. Or if I took the time off to do it, it was like, that was, no pay for that day whatsoever. So my kind of like social justice work shifted to worker justice, of like, we need, I need to be able to go to doctor's appointments. I still didn't have the language of like paid time off, things like that. But I started talking with some union folks. Like I had shifted to working at Kroger. I was a rank and file person, and I was talking to the union reps about like my contract of like, how can I get, if I request these days off for appointments at certain times, whatever. So they was like, you should come and do some work with us. Like, let's pull you out and just do some political organizing so you can talk to other people and get them, excited about the unions. So I started doing that. So I just got like heavily involved in worker organizing, and kind of like shifted totally away from the maternal justice, because I felt like this was it was just like top priority. But it also threw me into work. And I kind of distanced myself from my child. So my mom took my child. I went out with the labor for like a year, and was like, okay, my mind is on work. I'm not getting tight with this baby, because there was always a fear of like, because I loved the other baby so hard and so much and all this other, I was all in my head. But that's how I felt. That's how I coped with, that's how I grieved. I threw myself into work, and I distanced myself from my child. So, focused heavily on union organizing, was all over the country organizing as a young worker, like getting all of the accolades, the awards of like, this young Black union activist doing all these great things. But it wasn't until I had got to Chicago and I was organizing like Food for Less workers, which is Kroger, in the South. And I was just like, something is not like right. Like community organizing needs to happen before labor organizing. And this is the disconnect of why. And this is maybe 6 years after Paige was born that I started working in Chicago, where UFCW. Paige was still in Atlanta with my mom. And I was like, I'm also really missing my child right now too. So it's like everything was coming back full circle. I'm like, okay, maybe I missed a step. There's need to be some community organizing happening. And I ended up going back to Atlanta and started like doing more reproductive justice, organizing, just volunteering, and trying to build back kind of like where I was at before I did the labor organizing. And that's when I got with 9 to 5. So it was more focused on women's rights. It was more focused on getting back into the maternal health field and like really digging into that piece of work. So it was a weird pathway.
So, and I think we all end up on our winding roads that get us to where we're trying to get to. And it sounds as though that also was your activism, was your coping mechanism, leaning into the work, but also what feels like the way to make it better for other people, even if you couldn't make it better for yourself. Yeah. And I think that sort of sounds like that Black woman superhero, superwoman affliction that we have. And I call it an affliction on purpose, because I don't think the majority of us want to wear the cape. But we put it on anyway. Mm-hmm. And then, or it's been put on us. And we have just sort of allowed it to weigh us down in ways. How has that affected your relationship with Paige? How old is Paige now?
Paige is 15 now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so did you ever talk this through with her at all? Having any conversations around her siblings that she never got to meet, and how you were coping with grief?
Yeah, it's interesting that that is such a recent thing. Like, I would say maybe in the past 3 years that we've actually had to have that that conversation. Like, Paige struggles with a lot of mental health issues of just like manic depression. And I think a lot of that stems from, she seeing me around as a younger child, but I'm not physically there or emotionally there and not understanding why. And I didn't even really understand why until, like I say, recent when we started doing like family therapy and talking it out. And it hurt our relationship then as she was growing up, but she fully understands it now. We had to have that conversation about Jason and Renaya. She knows about her siblings. Like, I have pictures of them. Um, we celebrate their birthdays every year. And she also understands kind of like her journey, my pregnancy journey with her and everything that happened, and how, I just didn't know and understand how to support her as a child. But it has actually, our relationship now feels so much more genuine and better after we had that conversation. And one, I was able to get that off of my like heart and mind to say, I mean, essentially, I messed up, but I did what I thought and what I knew best as a mom. And I put you in, a situation with my mother who you were, so taken care of. What my mom think is her child now, which is fine. That's fine. But yeah.
Yeah. And she got her two mommies.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
Do you think that if doctors would have offered you better support therapies after the loss of your children, and even through the medical issues with Paige when she was first born, that things would have been different for you? That you would have not dove into the work in that way, or maybe even done the work?
Yeah, I think it definitely would have been different because I would have understood what I was going through. I don't think I understood that it was grief that I was dealing with. It's not, our family didn't, like, we didn't grow up with pity or feeling sorry for yourself. It was like, you go through some shit and then you get through it, right? Like, pray about it and move on. It's not something that you hold and deal with. And I took that same stance with the babies. When they passed, we had their funerals. That was it, let it be. So I think if I had the therapy to understand that, like, there's phases of grief, I was really mad. Like, I was really mad with God at one point. And I'm just like, how am I not worth having these babies? Like, this is what I want. I want to be a mother. So I went through like anger a lot. I went through just the distancing of, like, with Paige, I deliberately distanced myself. And I know that I did. So yeah, the therapy would have helped me understand those different phases, and that it was normal for me to go through that. Like, it wasn't, it wasn't really something wrong with me. That's just a normal thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that idea of, the superhero Black woman, I think it's also ingrained into the medical field, whether they want to, outwardly admit it or not. And so, but even something you said makes me think about bereavement. A lot of bereavement policies for workers is 3 days. You get 3 days off when someone dies. And I'm not sure who came up with the 3 days or what that 3 days is scientifically backed by in some way. It's like by day 3, what happens? That
Right.
you should just be able to go back and be a fully functional person when it doesn't matter who it is that died, whether it's your child or your parent or, your cousin or whoever, you still get this same 3 days. Tell me a little bit about the paid leave work and what that fight is, because I know a lot of folks think about it in the terms of a maternity leave, but
Mhm.
knowing that it's a bigger expansion of that. How would you describe that work to folks?
Yeah, so it is definitely is much more than maternity and paternity leave when we talk about pay leave. It is the opportunity to like, reset your mind, your heart, and your spirit. Whether it's grief, whether it's just like exhaustion, we don't think about the amount of time that we spend just, constantly working, that our bodies need that time for rest. I think about it more so now of like mental health situations, not just deaths that folks need time off. There's been this like huge conversation around like people needing time off to visit incarcerated families, or to help support, in caregiving, whether it's somebody that you're caregiving for, or if you need to go help and just give a family member a break that's doing caregiving services. I think about the folks that, like in my caregiving now, people are always like, just ask for some help. We can come and sit, or we can come and do this. And I'm like, but you have to go to work too. And having paid time off so that they're not overworking themselves to come help and support me as a caregiver, is something that we don't often think about in that space either. So, you know, with paid leave, it's not it shouldn't be an optional thing, or it shouldn't be like a work, an employer thing based thing, right? I think about how now, like the employer that I have fully understands what it means to have paid leave. But if for whatever reason I was to leave this job, or this job no longer is there, I would not be able to care for my family, like because there's not universal paid leave, or federal paid leave, and the amount of caregiving responsibilities, um just, yeah, it puts me in such fear of like I'm stuck in this field in order to caregive for my family.
Because right now you're currently a caregiver um, for your husband.
Yes, I'm a caregiver for my husband, who is in stage 5 kidney failure. He recently just went blind because of his type 1 diabetes. And then I'm a caregiver for my mom, who is stage 4 sarcoidosis. So it's, yeah, constant need for both of them. Sarcoidosis it's a rare form in African American people of scarring tissue that builds up over their lungs. So this is what Bernie Mac died of.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. It's very rare. There's no cure for it. It is predominantly in African Americans. And there's just nothing they can make them comfortable, which comfortable is injecting them with steroids, which is not a good thing because, they swell up, they gain a lot of weight. So you're not even really making them comfortable. But yeah, it's just massive scarring tissue building up all over the lungs until one day the lungs just will collapse.
So simultaneously doing that while caring for your husband, who is he able to be on the transplant list for a kidney, or is that not an option?
It is an option. What's very rare with him is he has to have a kidney and a pancreas at the same time.
Oh.
So he would have to be on both transplant lists, kidney and pancreas, and they would have to come available at the same time, which is that's the hard part. He has a better chance of getting a kidney than a pancreas, and then even less chances of getting them both at the same time.
Mhm. And so what does your day-to-day look like right now?
My day to day is uh dialysis 3 days a week with my husband. My mom has to get echo scans every other week because she also has a torn artery in her heart, which they can't fix because if they can't fix because of the sarcoidosis. If they put her under, she would be permanently on a ventilator. She would never come off, and it would speed up whatever the process God has for it to take her home. So they just scan her heart every 2 weeks. So I am in a hospital space probably 4 out of 7 days a week. There's multiple doctor's appointments between the two of them. And then there's therapy for me, Paige, so it's my weeks consist of a lot of hospitals, caregiving responsibilities. I'm the sole provider for my home because my husband can't work. So yeah, it's a lot. And then there is my full-time job, right? Like fighting for these policies that we need, fighting for better pay for caregivers. So yeah, it's a interesting week.
I knew that you were doing some caregiving. I wasn't aware of to what extent it was and how deeply you are entrenched in the day-to-day of caring for loved ones while still trying to do this work. And I was just like, holy crap, how is she balancing? Not that I believe there's any real balance to any of it, like you just pull through one day at a time. But how are you doing? How is your body and heart and soul handling life right now?
Yeah, I think I have resorted back into my typical coping skills of working, right? Like trying to do as much work as I can. So I have the businesses, my side hustles, all of that stuff that I throw myself into. I'm dealing with a lot of guilt right now. Like I feel I just want to take off and just not deal with anybody, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, Erika, that's so wrong. But it's really what my body needs right now. Like I need a space where I have 1 to 2 weeks, maybe even a month where I'm not caregiving or I'm not running to a hospital or going to an appointment or talking to a therapist on behalf of somebody else. So I'm dealing with a lot of guilt on that level. And I think it's just because everybody is getting worse, like they're progressing. And it's if I don't take the time now, what's going to happen when, we're on this train. We know how the train is going to end. But I don't want it to be like a crash to where the stuff that I'm feeling, the tiredness, the just exhaustion, I don't want that to be kind of like my downfall necessarily, right? Like then I'm going to need a caregiver. But I'm also like, I don't really have the time, the finances to just take a month off and have somebody else do the work either. Because it's,
do you have some help at all, like with home health care workers or anything like that? Is that helpful?
It's not really helpful. We have Jeff has 2 nurses he has a nurse that come in twice a week, but they're so underpaid and just they don't give, they don't care. You know what I'm saying? They are just overworked. They go from house to house. They do this and they're almost like robots. So there's no real care when they come in. They come in to do a job and that's it. And I feel like that's why I really lean into the work, because if we paid them the salaries that they deserve and the amount of work that they're doing, we would get better support as caregivers for that. So I try not to lean on that a lot because it's frustrating. They come in, they hood, they loud, they just do anything.
Do you feel like you can't trust it?
Yeah.
And trust them to do a good job. Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's exactly what it is. And that leads to me having to get up 3 days a week at 5 a.m. to take him to dialysis. I see the other patients that come in there with transportation and the folks are just so careless with them. They don't help them. I find myself helping people when I go to drop him off in the morning. I'm helping some of the folks with their bags and this, and the people they just don't care. And I'm like, why would I trust my loved one in that situation, because then that's going to be a whole nother grief I have to deal with if something happens while they're in the care of somebody else. And that's one of the biggest fears.
On a recent episode that will have aired by the time this episode airs, I talked to my oldest, who is a preschool teacher now, and has a class of 3-year-olds. And I talked to Shay about their love for children. Like, my child has this deep, unending love for children, which is why they're a preschool teacher. Like, I can't get over how maternal my baby is, right? And also has this this special knack for working with children with developmental delays, autism, and the such. And I told Shay, I said, this is the job for you. Like, this is where you belong, because this is what we need. And I would trust you with my children. Other people will trust you with their children because you care so deeply. But we also talked about the fact that teachers are so underpaid, and especially early childhood. You talk about, basically thinking about she's just a daycare provider, sort of thing. And that's not what Shay is. And it's the same for home health care workers, that you're going to get people who are just doing what they're doing because they need a check, and it's still not enough to do whatever they need to do. And if they have all of these other pressures on themselves, they don't have paid time off, they don't have job security in that way, or making enough money to pay all of their bills, that they can't concentrate on the work at hand, and they don't have room to love, and they don't have room to care about the patients in the way that they should. And people should be worried about that the same way they should be worried about teachers not being paid well, and that we're leaving our children with them all day long. And you want them to succeed, and you want them to be safe. And when something happens and they're like, I don't know why all these teachers are ending up in jail for doing X, Y, and Z, like, because you just got some of anybody out here doing some of anything. And so, I see such a, it's all care, right? It's this care economy that we've talked about, and it's infrastructure in order for other folks who are not doing care as a job in that way to be able to go and do whatever their job is to the best and highest ability. And I'm wondering how, or if you've been able to help people connect those dots to the infrastructure of care and just the overall economy.
Yeah, so I really try to make those connections when I'm talking to funders and people that are resourcing this work. And to the extent that they're resourcing it is, it's helpful, but it's not enough. And there's so much more that can be done to put us on more of like a winning path of higher pay for, these professions. But I feel like it's almost like people don't understand it until they're in the thick of it. And then they have to be responsible for caregiving themselves, or they have to be hiring people, or see that their loved ones are being mistreated. Like, it takes a lot of conversation to make these connections. People in our communities understand it. They may not, fully understand how to go about making the change, but they understand what it means. I want people to fully understand that caregiving is an option, right? Like, it's not a mandated thing just because you're a human person, or you're a Black woman and you are, you're prone to be that nurturer and that care person in the family. Like, I have really lately been thinking about, like, there are people in this world that genuinely love doing this. And it's nothing wrong with me saying that this is too much for me to care for my husband or to care for my mother. And I'm doing it with, no complaints or anything, but I would rather the people in this world that this is like their passion, similar to your daughter, like, she is a nurturer, and for like, that is her, that's like her being for being here on this earth. And those people should be paid and treated with dignity and given everything that they need for that. And it shouldn't have to fall on just the next of kin in the family if that's not what they're there for, right? Like this is never something that I thought. And my caregiving didn't start with my husband. Like in the midst of all the things I was going through, Paige was like 3. My dad got really sick, kidney cancer, asked me to relocate to Ohio to come back and take care of him. And then 4 months later, he died, went into a coma, all the things. So I was caregiving for him. That was my first like real introduction into caregiving and what it took. And at that point, I was like, this is not for me. I'm doing it because I'm a daddy's girl and he asked me to do it. But caregiving is that's not my ministry. It's not my call. But there are people out there and I want them to be supported and paid, and because it is a lot of work. So making those connections, I think that's why I go so hard in my advocacy work, because I know that this is something that is worth, I would pay a caregiver more than I would pay a doctor, honestly, or a teacher.
Girl, say that again.
Because they are, like what they're doing is remarkable, and it is saving lives. A caregiver is saving lives. Teachers are, they are developing and creating and nurturing and spend more time with our kids than we do, honestly. So, it's levels to it, but our care economy is totally thrown off.
So we have an election coming up. And although, the work that you do, the work that I do, is somewhat involved with election work. It's past the election, right? It's passing, makes its policies and policies that work for everybody in the country. How do you see this upcoming election affecting the work that you're doing? Are you concerned, hopeful? Like, what are you feeling about this care economy, and the workforce and the care economy that you're fighting for?
Yeah, I am extremely concerned. I think no matter what this administration looks like in 2025, I don't think that there is a side that is fully embedded in understanding what is needed for the care economy. I think there's going to be a lot of promises this year. There's going to be a lot of conversation about, yes, we need paid leave. Yes, we need childcare for all. Yes, we need this. And it's a ploy. It's drink the Kool-Aid now, and then we want you to spit it out, come 2025, because right now we're not going to worry about it. Right. And we learned that with like Build Back Better. They dangled that care and paid leave and all of this over like the care organizations, all of the care advocacy groups, and we bought it, right? Like we were so like hopeful that the world was going to change, that we was going to have all types of like care policies that actually reflected the needs of our communities. And it was a straight slap in the face. And I'm more so worried about the fact that we're not prepared for that, right? Like we're not preparing for it. We are buying in again to this this talk about, we'll do better by communities, we'll do better by care policies, we'll have more exclusive policies or more progressive policies. And we're not preparing for what if that doesn't happen? And then we end up, again, scrambling after Build Back Better and trying to figure out something else or next steps or whatever. So that's really what worries me the most. I don't see anybody doing anything miraculous in this next administration, either sides. And we're not prepared for it. We're not holding them accountable enough. Like we're not being progressive enough. We're still being like very moderate in our fight and in our ask. And it's not going to do anything for the families that actually needs this help.
And so for you, what does universal leave look like? What would be the best policy that could pass that would help the most people?
Yeah, I think, I think there needs to be some type of like gold standard language around what is qualified as paid leave. It shouldn't be separate from maternity leave or paternity leave. It should be just leave, right? Everybody is not trying to have kids, but they need 12 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever, to do whatever they need to care for themselves, or loved ones or whatever. So I think, having very progressive language and more than the common 6 to 8 weeks of leave. Like there needs to be, and there's studies from other countries that, they have statistics on what that looks like when you have real care policies, how that affect the economy, how that affect the workforce. And we just need to buy into some of those programs.
Are there particular countries that are doing it? Well, all of them, I think, are doing it better than the United States. But are there any that are at that gold level that you see?
I don't know if they're like super, super at the go level, but I think about like the UK where everybody has insurance in the UK, no matter what. Like they have insurance. They're able to get the healthcare services that they need. I'm not really sure what their paid leave policies are, but they do have paid leave for everybody. Like it's not something that's employer based or state based or city, whatever how they're broken up in the countries. But um, it is definitely more than what we have over here.
You mentioned earlier about the job that you currently have. And although I know that you like the job that you are currently at, if you had to leave for whatever reason, and you're saying that you'd be concerned because where can you work and get the time that you need, and with an employer that understands, what life is lifing for you right now, and what that looks like. And that's a big concern. I think about all of the people who might be stuck in jobs that they don't like, but they have some benefits, but it's not enough for them to, really love the job that they're in, that people get stuck in that way. What do you tell those folks that might be listening who don't really understand or haven't been involved in the fight for paid leave and may have had some experience around it, or not, like how to tell their story? Just what are steps that they can do in order to be in this fight along with you?
Yeah, so I encourage everybody to find some type of political home, some type of organization in your community, whether it's with, Family Values at Work or somewhere in your community, to just get the political education needed around understanding why, we put so much energy in fighting for these policies. But to also understand, or to know that we understand that, we are multi-issue based families, right? So while we're not currently thinking about paid leave, it might be housing that we're thinking about. It might be childcare, something that we're thinking about. It's all intersected. And as we build, momentum and power for the policies around paid leave, that we are actively, building also childcare and housing and showing that all of these policies need to be progressive or gold standard for our communities. But it takes each individual to come to this space and share their story, and not to share it for, to relive the trauma. It is to share your story, to build power. All of my stories and everything that I've gone through, I now know and understand that, God took me through these, not because I wasn't good enough to have those babies or whatever. It was because there are families, Black women out there that are afraid to tell their story, or they think that they're alone. And so me telling and sharing my story is empower and to uplift and to guide people in a direction to know that we have the same lived experiences. And that the more we come together, the more we do things as a community, the more powerful we will become. So yeah, they got to find that political home.
And I appreciate you saying that, that the caregiving is hard and that, you wish you had some time to yourself or that you didn't have to do it all yourself. I think that's the other thing of people feeling guilty
Hmm.
for having their own feelings about it, you know, being sad or angry or scared to do it. Some people just like, I can't take care of somebody else. I can't give someone else, shots or medication or, it's a lot of responsibility.
Hmm.
And I know in past when my grandparents got sick and being in them being in the hospital and there was like a third gear kicked in of okay, now I need to make sure that they're getting what they need and that paying attention to what medications they're giving and what medications they shouldn't be taking, that sort of thing, because you have to be that fierce advocate for your family member because no one's going to love them the way that you do, or and want to make sure that they get over this hump if possible of whatever is happening. And you really need that advocate there. But when that can be somebody else that might be better equipped, you want to have that option too.
Yep.
I really want to end this conversation asking you what are you doing for you though, to be able to cope better besides workaholicism that we both are afflicted with,
Hmm.
and all of that. But what is Erika doing for Erika? You, Erika, not me, Erika.
So that's interesting. That's actually one of the when I started doing the TikTok things, it was because somebody was like, people keep coming to me and like, Erika, you need to worry about yourself. You need to focus on self-care. What are you doing for self-care? And self-care for me right now is literally um to have a bougie bedroom. Like, I mean, the highest thread count sheets with all of that's literally what's bringing me so much joy and is my self-care because it's allowing me to get peaceful sleep at night. Like, and it's very small. It might not be what people consider self-care. And to most people, they're like, that's not enough. You need to be doing this. But it's working for me. It's helping me to get the rest that I need. It also creates this oasis in the midst of all of my caregiving. All of my caregiving happens in my house, right? And then I also work from my home. So it gives me this oasis that when I walk into my bedroom, I keep that door closed all day. So that when I walk in there, I'm walking into this luxury, like I have a ridiculously sized bed that pay ridiculous amount of money because I just want, that's just what I need right now. It is hard. And I tell people all the time, focus on self-care, focus on yourself. But it is very hard to do that and keep up with the day-to-day, and I want people to be okay with that. Like I want people to be okay for me if I say that I'm not going to a massage or I'm not taking a trip or I'm not doing this. Like understand that in the midst of all of this, I do understand what I need. And right now, I just need really good sleep. I need a really nice sized tub with wine and bubble baths every now and then. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all I can do for myself right now, because it is a heavy load that I'm carrying. Um, I am caregiver for my family, but with this work, I'm caregiver for the world, right? Like I'm a caregiver for democracy. So this is what I have enough right now to give myself for caregiving. I mean, for self-care.
I love that. I'm a caregiver for democracy. Um, are you able to discuss this with the folks that you're caring for?
um, I don't think so.
Hmm.
No, I don't think they would understand what I'm saying. Yeah. Mm-mm.
Yeah, because there's that sense of guilt of saying it to them.
Yeah.
but also wondering how, some of the folks being cared for, how they feel about being cared for, having to be cared for. And if they can see, because I haven't spent much time on that side of it, at this point in my life, besides small surgeries or what have you, but um, what they see, and can they see the level of heaviness that it adds, not because not taking away how much you love somebody, or want them to live their best life too while they are here. But yeah, just wondered if that's something that you've been able to, or if that makes sense even in therapy, to if therapists say, hey, that the caregiver and the caregiver have some of that conversation.
Yeah, I think my therapist has definitely said that, but I often think about it as my husband, who before all of this was very proud man that he didn't ask for help. He'd done everything on his own. How does that look, or how does that feel as a man, as a Black man? Definitely a Black man who won't go through therapy, but also a Black man that was the provider and now is not providing at all, right? Like that's a level of pride that is completely stripped from, like, you can't see at this point in your life, physically can't see. So I'm like, that would be a horrible conversation to have, and be like, I'm so tired. I'm so bogged down with caregiving for y'all. And you're sitting there with no sight, no, mobility. You go to dialysis 3 days a week. You sleep 7 days, 24 hours. It's not a conversation that I think is appropriate, honestly. Yeah, it's just, yeah. So my journals get all of the conversations. I'll be in the journals, be like, God damn, I'm tired. I'm tired of this. So yeah, it's, that's the outlet right now.
I know that there are doulas that work in this field with folks who are going through traumatic illness, and then they're like end of life doulas. And I think that those folks are also God sent, I think, too, because they help the families and the folks kind of deal with the different transitions of what life is, and what life is for them now as compared to what it was. And so, I encourage people to look into those folks as well, as another type of caregiving.
Yeah.
For the family and for the person dealing with it, especially maybe some folks who are adverse to therapy and the such. So yeah. There's so much to life that you don't know what's going to happen next, or that you don't expect on how your life is going to turn out, but you can only do the best that you can. And I appreciate you saying in your journey to self-care that you found some things that work for you, and to ask people to give you the space to diagnose what you need and not tell you what you need, because that's no different than telling somebody who is sick what they need versus listening to what they're saying actually ails them. And I think that was a really, really poignant point. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you so much for this conversation. So yay. Erika, what's your TikTok so people can follow you and see your caregiving funny videos?
Yes, it is Sage Plans. So SAGEPLANS.
Yeah. Okay. Sage Plans on TikTok. All right. I expect some new followers for you, because it is a good account, and I appreciate you doing that. And I appreciate you and taking the time for this conversation and your time in caregiving for the democracy of the world. And I am very happy and honored to be in this fight with you.
Same here.
Thank you, Erika.
Thanks for listening to Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. Hosted and executively produced by Erika Washington, with music, mixing, and editing by Black Gypsy LLC. Special thanks to KUNV 91.5 in Las Vegas. This show is powered by Make It Work Nevada, a project of Tides Advocacy.